Good morning. Welcome to the 220-1102. My name is Spike Xavier, and I will be your instructor for this journey as you prepare to take the 220-1102 exam as part of your requirements to get your A+ certification. So this 220-1102 is issued by CompTIA. CompTIA is a vendor agnostic organization, and what that means is pretty much every vendor, every organization, every company recognizes the titles and subjects that CompTIA puts together for their certifications. The 220-1102 is typically for people the second exam that they take. There are two exams required to be passed to get your A+ certification. The first one, which is the 220-1101, requires a passing score of 675, and the second one, the 220-1102, requires a passing score of 700. It doesn't really feel very different when you take these exams, meaning I took both the 220-1101 and the 220-1102 recently in order to prepare to teach the class, even though I've had my A+ certifications for a long time. And I didn't really feel like one was harder than the other. They just cover different subjects. For the 220-1101 exam, it covers mobile devices, meaning the physical mobile devices, networking, like IP addressing and things like that, hardware, virtualization, cloud computing. It's considered to be more focused on hardware. For most people, they take that class and that exam first, and then when they complete that, they go on to the 220-1102. But there is no hard requirement to do them in one order or the other. If you happen to be wanting to get A+ certified and you said, hey, the 220-1102 class is available right now, I want to attend a live class, I'm going to do that certification exam first, can I? The answer is yes. You can take them in any order that you like. You just need to pass the exams, both exams, to get the certification. For a lot of people, this is the first certification that they do get when they enter into the world of IT on a professional level. Now, at StormWind, we work very hard to provide you with a lot of resources for your exams. So if I come over here to me, this is me signed into this class actually to just be able to demonstrate, and I scroll down on the right-hand side. This is where there's a whole bunch of additional study resources that you can use. And for example, one of them is the 220-1102 objectives. And if you click on that, it will open up this page where you'll have a URL. And what I did is I right-clicked that and said open a new tab. And then this opens up to the CompTIA A+ certification objectives for the 220-1102. It's very important if you want to successfully pass these exams, and if you're in this class, it can be assumed that you do want to. Good morning, Judd. That you will want to become very familiar with this document, because this document outlines every single topic that you may encounter when you take the exam. And having very recently taken the 220-1102, I took it Thursday of last week, and this is Monday, I will tell you that 100% they adhere to the topics. I did not see anything on the exam that was not in this document, meaning the topics that were covered. And that's actually very comforting, because if you've ever taken other vendor exams, you may have experienced, like me, where they publish the exam objectives, you work really hard and brush up on all of them, you sit down for the exam and you encounter a couple of questions that you're like, that was not in the objectives. Okay, so CompTIA is very good about making sure to cover things that they include in the objectives. Just to take a quick cursory look through these and kind of share with you what I do, they give you all the information about the exams and what's behind them. And then really you start, as a student, you start to focus here. So it says percentage of examination. And what they mean by that is, okay, if you're going to sit down and take this exam, how much study time should I dedicate to operating systems? Well, in a perfect world, if this is accurate, you would dedicate 31% of your allocated study time to operating systems, 25% to security, 22% to software troubleshooting, and 22% to operational procedures. The thing is, honestly, they do a really good job. There is a high probability that when you take the exam, if you took a deep breath after, sort of thought about the exam experience, for me, I would say this is very accurate to the number of questions that if I was going to categorize them in one of these 4 domains, that was about the breakdown. So this is also very accurate, and that's very helpful, because if you're like, I'm not that good on security, well, that's 25% of the exam. So pay attention when you get to these security objectives and really focus in on making sure that you brush up on those areas that you don't feel comfortable with. Now, this exam and these objectives and this course, we cover all of the topics and subtopics. So if you look at operating systems, which is, if you look back up here, is 31% of your exam, the very first part of the operating systems domain is 1.0. And they list under 1.1 basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. So they cover Windows 10 editions. I can tell you that on this exam, they focus mostly on Windows 10, but they may ask you questions also about Windows 11. Okay, so there are some differences, and we're going to cover that. In this course, if it's in this document, we cover it in this course. That means that if we cover it in this course, and we cover everything in the document, that we make sure to cover all the objectives published by CompTIA for the exam. And again, having just taken the exam, I did not encounter one question that they don't give you the list of questions, but if they did, I'd be able to circle or write next to the question, not only which main domain operating systems, but I'd be able to say, oh, that question was under 1.1 or something like that. So this is going to be a vital, pivotal document, and they break it into subdomains here, and they give a lot of the verbiage like this, given a scenario, use features and tools of the Microsoft Windows 10 operating system. That's how a lot of the verbiage of the exam questions are, meaning the exam question verbiage is going to be very, like situational based. So you're going to be, instead of saying how much memory is required to do this, and you have like 4 options, typically it's going to be more like a technician arrives on a workstation and is experiencing these issues. What would be the next most probable type of choice that you make? So those questions like that. In my experience preparing for certification exams, honestly, I don't know how many certification exams I've taken. I think it's somewhere around 30 to 35 at this point in my career. But I find that the official or a trusted vendor of practice exam questions, it's like warming up for a fight or something, like if you're a boxer. It's really, really good to be able to practice exam questions that are formatted similar to what you're going to encounter. Because typically what happens is when you sit down for the exam, you're like, man, I just paid a bunch of money for this potentially, or maybe I'm only getting reimbursed if I pass, or, you put a lot of preparation in and it's game time. Like you're sitting in front of that computer and they go through the process however you decide to take the exam. I like to go to exam centers. I like to go there. And it's a proctored exam center. You sit in front of your computer, and you don't talk to anyone. You can't bring anything in there, and they sign you in, and you go through a couple prompts, and then boom, you're taking the exam. And by going through practice questions, what you'll find most likely is you'll get some practice questions wrong that you actually knew the answer to, and the reason for that is because you didn't read the specific language of the question. And it's not that the question's meant to trip you up, really, because I know that I have taken exams where it's very obvious to me that whoever they hired to author the question was just trying to trip people up with some weird setting that nobody ever goes to and they knew about. But that's not this exam. They're not trying to trip you up. But if you get in the practice of taking these practice exam questions, you get used to when you get one wrong and then it tells you got it wrong. You're like, what? I got that right. I knew that. And you go, oh, they said not or wasn't. And you just read it really quickly and you thought that it said was or is. And that's a valuable skill. Take your time, deep breaths, and just read the question. And what I also like to do is I've heard different instructors recommend read all the answers first. I don't think that's a bad strategy. If that works for you, great. What I like to do is read the question, read the answers, and read the question again. Now, when you sit down for this exam, what my experience was as far as the types of questions that you're going to encounter is the first part of the exam is, I'm going to call it front loaded for lack of a better term, but it's like a scenario. And it's a scenario. It could potentially be like a diagram of a room where you're dragging and dropping the right setting for equipment, interacting with drop-down menus and some graphics. So like it's a question that has like a paragraph or two of a scenario, and then you have to kind of make the diagram correct. And those are kind of much more complex questions than multiple choice. And on the CompTIA 220-1102 exam, most likely the first 5 to 6 questions that you encounter are going to be like that. Naturally, that's going to take more time than if you just have a multiple choice question, because even if you don't know the answer to a multiple choice question, you'll take your best guess and then you'll move on to the next question. But on those scenarios where you're dragging and dropping and, oh, I don't, you know what, now that I think about it, I'm going to move this over there and change this drop-down menu. You're kind of working with the question for a while. Well, you can be asked a maximum of 90 questions on this exam. That's what CompTIA publishes. On my exam, I think I had 75 questions. And so I'm not sure if they count when on those complex scenario questions. I don't know if they count each one of the parts of the answer. There might be 6 to 8 to 10 individual things you're answering. I don't know if they count each one of those as a point or half a point, but you won't be asked more than 90. So you're sitting there and you have an amount of time that you can take for the exam, and they have a little clock that's ticking. And so one of the things about taking this exam is you want to properly allocate the amount of time on the questions. And it's okay on those big, giant, front-loaded, scenario-based, complex questions that you encounter at the beginning of the exam. At least that's how it was on the 1102 and the 1101, the exams I recently took. Both times when I sat for those exams, those complex questions were the first 5 to 6 questions I got. And I really tried to pay attention when I took the exam this time, so that I can share with this information with you, was not to worry if that takes you 20 minutes. If you're like, oh my gosh, this 5 questions took 20 minutes and I've got 70 more to go, and that's I'm going to run out of time. So you don't want to take an hour on the first 6 questions. That would put you in a time crunch. But if it takes you 20 to 25 minutes for those first bunch of questions, if you sit down for the exam and you have that experience of the first 5 or 6 questions, or you'll know what I mean when you take it, they're pretty complex. And all of a sudden you jump kind of into the multiple choice type of questions. The remainder of the exam is going to be not as complex as those first ones. And it's okay to take 4 to 5 times the amount of time on those first questions than you take on the remaining questions. Typically, there's a little clock. When I took it, there's a little clock on the right side. It's like a countdown timer that tells me how much time I have left. And you do want to pay attention to that. Most likely, if you properly prepare for this exam, and this class being hopefully a huge part of that wonderful experience, then I would suggest that you just kind of keep your eyes on that clock as you're getting through those complex questions. And if it starts going past 20 minutes, you don't want to rush your answer, but you start to think like, okay, I got to make a decision here because I got to get to the multiple choice ones where I have hopefully maybe an hour left on the multiple choice ones. Okay, let me take a look at the chat. Let's see. Or don't believe mics work. Thank you. Okay, cool. Just questions about the mics. Yeah, that's correct. It's all chat. All communications are via chat. All right, so getting back to the slides, I took screenshots of the portal, the campus that I was just showing you. And the first thing you're going to notice is even though these menu items will actually be on the right, what we do is we break down these are like mini quizzes. So like I said, as much practice as you can get taking good exam-like questions, these are not the exam questions, of course, but exam-like questions that are topically sound, and practice like the type of question, drag and drop, fill in the blank, multiple choice. The vast majority, other than the complex ones, were multiple choice. Then that's going to be really, really helpful for you. So what we do is we provide these little mini quizzes. So after today's session, when we cover supporting operating systems today, maybe sit down and go through the quiz for the operating systems review and really go through that and try it a few times. It's just 10 or 12 questions. It's not 60 questions that requires a good hour of your time, an hour and a half of your time. This is just to give you like a quick 10 minutes of practicing the questions, making sure that the concepts that we went over sunk in, right? Because it's a huge amount of content. And so we recommend that you do this. So let me go through these. We have one set of questions called supporting operating systems, one for maintaining and troubleshooting Windows, one for maintaining users, workstations, and shared resources, one for installing, configuring, and maintaining other operating systems, Mac OS, Linux. We're going to cover those because there is a portion of that you're going to be asked on the exam. So just to look at one example question, what 3 keys can be used in Mac OS to open the force quit menu? And so what you need to do in this case, what 3 keys is you have 3 options that you need to check. Out of these 6, you need to pick the 3 that are correct. And then when you pick the ones you think are correct, you click check and it will tell you whether you got that answer correct or not. And so this is very reminiscent of what you see on the exam. When I took the exam and take these exams, I try to pay attention to when they give me answers, they give a question that has multiple answers required for the correct response. Do they tell me how many that I need? Well, this question doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you at the end, like select 3, but it does say in the question itself, when you read it, again, practicing read it, what 3 keys. So that's important, and you can find yourself feeling like you missed a question that you probably knew just because you have this oversight. And in the CompTIA exam, if it's not in the question like this is, typically at the end in parentheses will say select 2, select the best 2, or select 4, or select 1 or 2, and pay attention to that because you don't want to miss a question that you probably knew. Just because you forgot, you just picked one. You're like just picking one because it looks like multiple choice. Typically, if it's a square box, that's in HTML a checkbox. That means you can select none, one, or more than one inherently as the control of HTML. But in this case, you would select 3. It's a multiple select. So stuff like that is stuff that by taking these practice exams, it's very, very helpful. And again, these quizzes, these are available for you right now in your portal, and they go through each of the different topics: security concepts, securing workstations, troubleshooting workstations and security, and implementing operational procedures. In addition to that, we also have a full practice exam. So what I like to suggest to students, and it's completely up to you, my suggestion is, in order of studying for the exam, the way that I've been successful with taking a bunch of exams and passing them, my methodology is to grab the official objectives published by the vendor. Every exam I've ever taken, they publish an objectives document, like the one I showed you that you can download right from your campus. And that objectives document is your guide. And then what I do is I go through the process of, I create little websites because I love developing. Somehow I want to be able to type every single objective. And so I do it with a website. I either create a JSON file or I just write it in HTML. You can handwrite it down. You can type it in Notepad. You can, some way, have some engagement through every single objective in that document. And I like to make sure I've covered every single one. So that's what I do. I make these little websites, and then I create a CSS class to tell me when I feel comfortable that I've covered that objective. That's what I do. But could be overkill. In the past, I have also just written it down or just typed it on Notepad, not even worrying about the spelling, anything. Just connect that with all those objectives. It's just like this exercise I do. That's usually my first step, prepping for any certification exam. Then I'll get any book that looks good, that I feel comfortable. It's not like too exag. And I'll go through a book if there is one, and I'll sign up for a class like this, and I'll go through the class. If the class offers labs, I will take all the labs and do all the labs as well. And on something like this CompTIA A+ exam, if I come over here to my demo machine, one of the things that's really cool is most of the objectives you can actually do without doing damage in your environment. It's best if you're not sure. Well, it's not best. If you're not 100% sure that what setting you're changing or something you're doing isn't safe, don't do it. For example, when we cover the commands, like command line commands in Windows, we talk about format. Don't just try that command, okay? You may wipe out all the data on your drive. You may get in trouble, okay? What you want to do is anytime you're in an area, you're like, well, let me see control panel. Well, I know that if I'm on a Windows machine here. If I click the Windows command bar and I type in control panel, I know that doing that, I already know, I'm not unsure of the fact that doing that doesn't cause any harm to the system going into control panel. Now, typically you want to make sure you have permissions to do that, but there's a large amount, as I make it disappear, there's a large amount of things that you can do to prepare for this exam. I'm just trying to make this window a little smaller, that you can do just on a machine safely. If you 100% know you can do it on a machine safely, fine. If you're not sure, you can request labs. We have a set of labs for this class through a company called Boson. They're really good, and you can do all the labs safely there. I recommend, if you don't have access to it, getting access to a virtual machine if possible. A virtual Windows 10 machine will be really nice. A virtual Windows 11 machine, although you may run into the TPM issue. We'll talk about that in this class. If you have a virtual machine, something you can try stuff on that's isolated, that's not part of your corporate network, that's not going to be interacting with other devices, that you're going to, run into some issues and have problems, that's also really good. But something like the control panel, one of the things that I noticed that CompTIA really wants you to know is what is on this drop-down menu. And they just really want you to know that if you go to control panel, there are 3 views on Windows 10 and 11: category, large icons, and small icons. It's just something you'll probably be asked about. So as a consequence, it pays to when you get to that objective to be able to interact with some of those things and actually put that, basically you're cementing the concepts to an experience. And I think that's always very valuable. So we give you access to these quizzes. We give you access to a real practice exam. So in my going back to my how I prepare for these, I write all the objectives down or type them or create a little website, make sure I go through every objective, make sure that it's in my brain, like I need to know this, I need to know that. As I'm going through that process, I'm not really stopping and going and studying that objective. Like, oh, I don't know what that is. I don't do that at that stage. Then I get a book, then I get the class, then if they have labs, I start to do the labs. When I'm done with all of that, because that's a large bulk of material, and in this, when you're taking this class, I'm encouraging you to go through these quizzes kind of each day. You can go back and take a quiz multiple times. That's fine. So you may find yourself taking the first quiz for today and tomorrow's class. That's great. That's no problem. But by the time we finish the 8th session, you'll have gone through each of those quizzes, hopefully 2 to 4. Like, I'm ridiculous. I've gone through those quizzes probably 10 times each. Okay, that's not necessary. But you can go through them several times. You go through the class, you request access to the labs, go through the labs. You're done with all that. You've written down the objectives. Now you go to the big practice exam that we offer, which is similar to what you're going to experience in the exam, as close as we can get we don't have those highly complex scenario questions. But we're really trying to get you used to reading the questions, making sure you're paying attention to details about your answers. And you want to be getting a really high score in that practice exam, like almost perfect. Even if the first time you take it, you just like go 50%. It's okay. It's okay if you take these quizzes and you're like, I got all of them wrong. It's okay. Just take it again. And then pretty soon what you're going to see is you're going to become familiar enough with the questions after you click check and what the right answer is. You'll essentially kind of just know the question. And it will cease to be effective because you're just memorized what the right answer is. But you'll have gone through the process of getting to that point. By the time you get to the practice exam, now you've gone through the class, you've written down the objectives, and you've done all the quizzes multiple times. You've taken all the extra resources that we provided. There's downloadable documents we have for you to be able to get shortcuts, and you've practiced the commands in a safe environment, a virtual environment, not on your corporate work machine. This is a process. Now, if you just stop there and don't take the exam, you will know so much more than when you started that journey about these topics. Just naturally, you'll just know more. You'll find yourself knowing stuff you didn't even realize you knew, and you don't even know you don't know because you haven't been exposed to it, and that's awesome. But when you are getting ready and now you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to take the exam, getting really high grades, almost perfect grades, like in the 90 percentile on that practice exam, the big one that's on the campus. Then what I do, my last final step, is I go back to that objectives exercise that I talked about, and I go through each and every objectives. And then I look kind of like a crazy person, because what I do is I pretend like I'm explaining each objective to somebody. So which is basically what I do for a living at this point. But if I go back to the exam objectives document to give you an idea what I'm talking about, I will say right here, like, go to the control panel utility. And when I get to this topic of programs and features, like by myself, I'll just be sitting there, I'll be, programs and features are the programs and features currently installed or that can be installed on the Windows operating system. To uninstall a program or feature, you can select it in the programs and features and click uninstall. You also potentially have the option to repair, or when it comes to features, these are things that can be added in without having to actually download an exe from a vendor. These are features that can be added to the existing operating system, and you select the feature you want to add, go through a potential wizard, could be 1, 2, 3, 4 windows, some options, and you'll have added that feature, that functionality. Typical example of this would be if you're a web developer, you can add the feature IIS, Internet Information Services. It's a web server, so you can host websites on your local machine for testing and development. That, just what I just said, I look like an insane person, but honestly, that's what I do through these whole documents. So it takes a while. But the first time I go through it, I don't do that. I'm just writing it down, making some kind of connection to my brain. I don't know how it works. I'm not a scientist, but it does work. And then when I do that, I go back and I take another couple run throughs, the practice exam. And like by that time, I'm almost getting perfect scores. And then I schedule the exam, and then I wait. I try and schedule my exam. I'm a morning person, so I schedule it for the morning and try and make that the only thing I do that morning. And then go in there and deep breaths and hopefully pass, you know? So, and I'm just sharing that with you because I want you to pass the exam. I have taken the A+ 220-1102. Well, it wasn't called the 220-1102 at the time. It was 3 or 4 iterations back when I first encountered my A+ certification. And I failed this exam twice, okay? I also failed the A 220-1101 equivalent exam twice. So I just didn't give up. I guess because my dad was a Marine, that's how I got the name Spike. I just didn't give up. I'm just going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying. I did feel very defeated, honestly. Like it was very discouraging because it was a requirement for the job I was doing at the time. And I was a little bit nervous. Like, am I, you know what? I can just bow out and try something else, or I'm just going to keep doing this. And when I passed, it felt so good, by the way. But when I passed, I realized something. I said, you know what? Even though I didn't pass, and that was a valuable lesson as an instructor, because I don't want you to have that experience, honestly. It wasn't fun. Even though I didn't pass, I did learn, and I had to go back and go, okay, and try it again. And I'm like, oh, and I mean, I was barely missing. And then I go back and then I passed. And I'm like, so I just want to encourage you to not focus on passing or failing, even though I like easier said than done, and I know this, is that just keep going. Eventually you'll pass because you just keep learning, okay? But I want you to pass the first time. That's why we're giving you all these extra tools. That's why it took a lot of time to make sure all objectives are covered in the class. And this is my advice for getting ready for the 220-1102 exam. Okay, getting back to the slides. We also have flashcards. And one of the things that you'll find very useful in the job role that this exam has, a support technician of some kind, or the CompTIA A+ is a certification you're getting on your way to your job role. Like if you're going to be a security person, if you're going to CompTIA certification pathway, they recommend that you have the IT fundamentals, which is the first one, and then the A+, which is the second one, and then a network plus, and then security plus. So in that job role, you're still going to find, in my experience of IT, so I've been in IT for 20 years. Is that right? Yeah, about 20 years now. And the A+ stuff that I spent so much time learning and missed the exams and didn't give up, that is the stuff I use most. And one of the most valuable things is getting this vocabulary, okay? The vocabulary. So we provide flashcards. And if you look at the flashcards, RAM limitation on 32-bit operating systems. So you need to know what RAM is, random access memory. You need to know what a 32-bit operating system is versus a 64-bit operating system. You need to think of in terms of a system. You need to know those vocabulary words in the context of an A+ support technician or a security specialist in IT or a data center administrator. You get those fundamentals when you study for and prepare for the A+ exam. By the way, the answer would be 4 gigabytes on this one. It should be correct. And the point is, these flashcards are really helpful. I always encourage students to go through the flashcards as well. Eventually you'll memorize them, which is the point. So in that case, that's actually something you want to do. Now, a lot of us, we work in Windows environments in our businesses. And so we may not have the same exposure to Linux that people that work in Linux environments have. So if you work in your IT career for a while, you'll probably run into people that run servers and web servers and application servers, and they may spend their whole time on Linux operating systems of one flavor or another. If you have friends that get into security, or if you get into security, there's several Linux editions that actually are very focused on security. Kali Linux, you probably heard of that. That's one of the more popular ones. Well, we need to be familiar with the published on the exam objectives commands from Windows and from Linux. So we definitely have you covered in this class. We're going to cover it, but we also provide a couple of cheat sheets, and it's not cheating, it's just like a term referencing this document that you can download, and you could just kind of go through these. And I highly encourage you to be able to access Ubuntu is the one that I have several Linux versions of, virtual machines on, to be able to practice these and get to know what they are. Do not do these commands in production in your corporate environment if you happen to have access to a Linux build without knowing exactly what they do. But you're going to find it to be very useful to have access. And again, our labs also provide that practice, but access to a Linux build to be able to practice these commands, because you most likely will encounter questions on the exam. I think learn all the ones on this cheat sheet, but chmod is probably one you're going to really want to know. grep, and then pwt, print working directory. That's also one that I was glad I knew what it did when I took the exam. So I'll just say that. Now, again, these are the exam objectives. I showed you how to download these from our campus, and that's awesome. But you can download them from the campus. It's all in one place, download them from the campus. But eventually, you are 100% going to want to go to, and to take the exam, you're going to want to create an account with CompTIA.org. Especially if this is your first certification with CompTIA. You go to CompTIA.org and you create an account with CompTIA.org. And then what happens is they give you access to all of the resources for the certification. So I'm on CompTIA.org. I mouse over certifications. And in this class, we're focused on A+. So I would click on A+. And if I click on A+, it takes me to a page dedicated, this is right from the horse's mouth, to this A+ certification. And they have some training offers that you can take. I do like the CompTIA practice exams as well. I will buy those and use them when I prepare for their exams. They're great. I typically use not only the stuff we have here at StormWind, but if the official vendor offers it as well, I'll use those. But there's these tabs: overview, exam details, preparation, and renewal. Right now, the A+ certification has the letter CE next to it, which means you have to renew it every 3 years. There's continuing education credits that you take, and once you're certified, you support that you've done certain things like webinars or classes like this, and then you have a certain amount of credits that you have to do within 3 years of your original certification, and then from there you will they'll just renew your certification. So one of the things that they offer, and you don't have to go through this, is they offer the ability to download the certification. So if I click on exam details here, it says get practice questions in exam objectives. To do that, they do require that you fill out a form and give them your information, and then they'll give you links to download a set of practice questions that are great. They're great, but they're not enough to prepare for this exam, but they help. Everything helps. And they let you download that objectives document, which is great. And they keep it completely up to date. So I highly recommend when you're preparing for this that you do prepare for the 220-1102 and interact with the CompTIA website. Use all the resources that we provide you on your campus to your advantage. Take your time. The amount of time that I typically allocate personally for a certification exam is I like to allocate 90 days because I have my job in the daytime, and I like to allocate between a half an hour and an hour 3 to 4 times a week, and then 4 to 6 hours on the weekend for about 3 months. And that's about how long it takes me for most certification exams. A couple of the Microsoft Cloud exams take me a little longer. Just to give you a guideline of if you think like, how long does it take? Now, if your job allows you to study for the exam as part of your job, I know there's some jobs that are like, look, your job is to pass that A+ exam. You got, 2 months. Well, that's, you can condense that.